Hello and welcome to another episode of the GCSUNScast, the longest running Gold Coast Suns show on the interwebs, and that's all thanks to our Patreon sponsors: Dale Snelling, Jack Stad, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Brody Burgess, Kate Kelland, Tom Kim, Chris Moore and Tim. Thank you all so much for your Patreon support. You can find us at patreon.com/GCSUNScast. Also check out our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcast from. Also like, subscribe and review. That helps people find the Sunscast. Now, today's special guest is Tom Boswell. I'm your host, Shane, and let's get into it. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. It's good to be back for a second time.
Yeah, it's been a while since last time. I think a lot went down. You've been quite busy over at the Gold Coast Bulletin, with football being such a big thing last year here in Queensland, and it seems to be off to a busy news week this week as well. How has it been for yourself and the Gold Coast Bulletin? Do you think there's been a larger uptake and larger interest in AFL and in particular the Gold Coast Suns?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess more supporters in the sport at grassroots and elite level is only going to lead to more interest, and that interest means that more people want to know about it and kind of grow their knowledge and know about the teams they support. So it kind of feeds on the back of that. A lot of the times you'll see the media reflect what people are reading the most. So traditionally that's been rugby league, and that's understandable, but you see a lot more AFL popping up, and that's probably on the back of not only the success of the AFL brand, but also the impact that the competition had last year in COVID.
Yeah, and your Gold Coast Suns podcast, The Heat Room, sponsored by the Gold Coast Bulletin, that's taken off quite a bit. You're now no longer just sort of on the Gold Coast Bulletin page. You've spread out and you're on all good podcasting platforms. That's obviously doing pretty well for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great deal of fun. I enjoy it immensely. So I figured out why you've been doing this for so long, mate. It's really great to be able to go out there. It's a different format and allows you to kind of express opinions and give a bit more back to the fans, because a lot of the times in stories you only really got 300, 400 words to really nail down a certain issue or get a couple of quotes out. But there's a lot of information, a lot of stuff that we kind of come across for the Suns and other sports that you probably just don't get to put out there, that a lot of fans probably want to know. So it's a good avenue to kind of do that and to build some engagement with the fans.
It certainly is. I enjoy listening to it every week. I've put up a post on our Facebook page, so you can find the latest episode of the Heat Room podcast right here on our Facebook page, the GCSUNScast. It's certainly easier to talk about football than to write about it, I presume. I can imagine the amount of work that goes into writing an article and all the editing and then putting it out there, when you could basically just talk about it and probably find it a lot more fluent and a lot more easier to discuss. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, both have pros and cons, but you could spend half a day making all the calls you need for a certain story and kind of crafting it and shaping it the way you kind of need to get it all across. Whereas if you have a bit of information in front of you and you provide a bit of colour through a bit of banter and chat, then it's I find you probably find the same, that you probably hit the half-hour mark pretty quickly. So you could go on for hours, but I think everyone will get bored of us. But you find you kind of take up the time pretty quickly, and it shows how enjoyable it is and how easy it is to do.
Yeah, it certainly goes by very fast, and I usually have to scrap quite a bit. But it helps when you've got a good co-host, someone to bounce off and chat with, and you do such a great job there with Sean Tobin. He's always very positive and lots to talk about, and he knows his stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. He's a good media man, Shawnee. I came across him just before I probably started the Bulletin, when he was kind of working as the main media man at the Gold Coast Suns, and back in the Carmichael Hunt days. And we kind of struck up a good friendship and worked pretty closely there at the Suns on a daily basis virtually. So when he kind of went off and did his own media work with Exclusive Insight with Gary Ablett, then it kind of opened him up to be able to do different things that he kind of wanted in different passion projects. So He knew it was something that I wanted to do for a while, and thankfully he's a lot more experienced on the technical side of things. I kind of lean on him a lot to do the editing and production and that kind of stuff, and I just kind of try to bring the information. So we kind of bounce off each other pretty well, and it seems to do okay.
Yeah, it does. Speaking of media, the Amazon documentary for the AFL making their mark came out in the last few weeks. Have you had a chance to watch that? And what are your thoughts on it?
I did. I absolutely loved it. I'm glad they do it. I hope it kind of provides a foundation for more of this. I'd love to see different kind of storylines played out over the next few years, and I hope it's something they can almost turn into an annual event with different things. I love the format of it. I loved being able to see different teams. I would have loved to see a pure Suns one, because I found myself at stages wanting to kind of skip ahead just to watch the Suns, despite how good I enjoyed Nick Naitanui and the likes of Stephen Caniglio. But yeah, I did kind of want to skip ahead to the Suns. I got a chance to catch up with Stewie Dew kind of the week it came out, and I was just chatting to him and wanted to get his thoughts on it, just kind of off the record. And he was saying you kind of realise how much is cut and just kind of left on the cutting room floor, because these guys followed them around for the whole year, and obviously they only got a few minutes at a time over 6 or 7 episodes. So a lot of it was kind of cut out, and obviously they go for the drama, which they understand. But yeah, you would have loved to see an in-depth one on just the Suns and then just like their own little platforms to do it on. But overall, I think they did a terrific job. What did you make of it?
I enjoyed it, same as you. It was something that I took an interest in the whole thing, but as it went on and on, I found myself really only just wanting to get to those bits about the Suns. Is not to say that everything else wasn't of interest or valuable. There was a lot more drama in the other stuff, but seeing the way Stuart Dew interacted with the players and with the media as well, as you would have known from your experience, it was very interesting and quite telling. There was a brief moment, I think, maybe only 1 or 2 scenes where Stuart Dew was actually interacting with the media, in particular the guy from Seven, I think it was, that kept calling him Dewey.
Yep.
Does that sort of remind you, like, does that line up with how you see it as being part of the media?
I think that was a pretty unique stance. I was a bit disappointed they actually showed that, because I don't think it portrayed young Mitch in a very a nice light. I know he's embraced it pretty well in the aftermath of it all, but in terms of what you could, what added value to the actual episode, I think that was a bit of a cheap shot at the old Mitch. I guess I personally didn't like it, but yeah, I'm sure that kind of stuff goes on all the time, and he didn't seem to mind it too much. So I don't know. It didn't sit well with me, that one.
I did think it was funny at the time. Like it sort of sold me on the humour of Stuart Dew being that sort of relatable sort of bloke. But again, thinking about how it sort of paints Mitch in that scenario, it's not a good look, and it also sort of comes back onto Stuart Dew as being someone that, you know, said something about someone else behind their back, sort of thing. Even though I don't think there was too much malice intended in it.
No, definitely not. So it doesn't reflect Stewie's character, and then it probably just wasn't necessary to add into it, I don't think. But yeah.
But were you across what he was doing with the mountain bike, the Everest challenge when that was happening? Were you across all that?
Yeah, it was pretty impressive at the time. I couldn't believe it, and I think he said he actually get to go in the night before to get a head start on it, because the guys were going to catch up on him. But I know in those long distance events that you tend to try to eat food that, you know, you'll have the gels and that kind of stuff that give you quick bits of carbs and sugar and that kind of stuff to go through. So I can't remember how many he said he ended up going through, but after a few of those, you start to get very sick of them. So I can't imagine how he was able to kind of stomach it all over that period, and then plus stay awake and keep the legs turning over. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was about 23 hours or so he'd been doing it for. That's pretty amazing. And then Matt Rowell and I think it's Alex Rigby, the physio.
Yep.
I think they did it in about 17 or 18 hours.
I don't know if they mentioned it, but Alex Rigby used to be a professional Ironman.
Oh.
So those long distance triathlons. So he's very fit, mate. I reckon he could probably run off the legs of a few of those Suns boys. So he's a sneaky one there, Alex. He's a very fit man.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a great bit of documentary. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend checking it out on Amazon. Hopefully they bring out another one in the next couple of years. I'd love to see the documentary on the rise of the Suns. It looks like we're heading in the right direction.
If they had to follow another person or player, who would you want?
If they were to follow one person, I'd be very interested in actually following not another player, but following Mark Evans. With what he's done in the last few years, with bringing players into his home as well, I'd be very curious to see how that all plays out. I'm not sure if he would still be doing it with the way this club is at the moment, but if you could go back 2 or 3 years and have camera crews following Mark Evans, I think that would be an amazing thing to watch.
Yeah, you'd pay a lot of money to see that one because obviously he's the man who knows all the secrets. So, so if you managed to get a camera following him, you'd be doing pretty well.
Okay, well, let's get into the football. This weekend there was a doubleheader at Metricon. Their first game was AFLW Gold Coast Suns versus the Geelong Cats. It was the last game of the season and unfortunately the last chance for the Suns to get a win, and they didn't deliver. 3 goals, 6-24, lost to Geelong, 6 goals, 5-41. They were slow out of the blocks, and it just continued another winless season. The best on ground was Alison Drennan, Lauren Bella, Lauren Ahrens, and I can't remember her first name, Levi. They were the best.
Madison Levi?
Yep, that's it, Madison Levi. I wanted to say Maddie there. But they were the best all season, and they continued up in this game. Kalinda Howarth was probably the notable person from this game. She had a return to form with 2 goals and one that happened to hit the post. So not a good finish to the AFLW season. They've had a lot of records this year, which they probably don't want to have. The largest losing margin, the lowest score, and also a winless season. So were you at the game for that one, or did you get there later for the North Melbourne men's game?
I saw a lot of it on TV and then arrived in live for the men's game, but I had a feeling that I wasn't going to be missing much in that AFLW game after the season they've had, which is really disappointing because they're a team that when they were created, they seemed to have this really good mix of youth and experience, and it seemed like they were being built in a really smart way as opposed to the men, but it's turned pretty quickly. A season that had so much promise. They showed glimpses last year and played some really good footy, but it seems like they've taken a lot of steps backwards. Those inside the club are determined to think that they've improved as a side and that the competition maybe has just gotten even better. But I don't know if that's much saving grace. It's been a really hard year to watch, and I'm sure all the girls are really disappointed. You mentioned the best players in that game, and you're right. They're the ones that have kind of stood up all year for the team, and I feel like there's a few key players that really probably missed their mark in a lot of games this year, and whether or not it was on the back of COVID or work, I'm not too sure, but it wasn't good to see, and particularly given David Lake is on a 2-year deal that ends this year. I mean, he's just come off a winless season in all those records you mentioned. When they review this, are they going to actually have to look at David Lake in his position?
They absolutely have to. From a fan's point of view, it's not good enough for winless season, and someone has to answer. I know it's cliche, but it is a win-loss game, and someone's head has to roll if the team's not performing. Unfortunately for David Lake, he's the head coach, and he has to wear the brunt of that. I think it wasn't a good look, his post-match conference. He seemed to be very much die on this hill sort of attitude, defending himself and the way the team's gone this year. And that's probably not certainly not what fans want to hear, and probably not what he should have been messaging out of the club.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Do you have any sort of dates on when we can expect any news regarding his contract and the review of the AFLW season? Does that happen soon, or does that get put on hold?
They'll do player reviews and then review the coaches and all that kind of stuff after that. That's the usual kind of standard procedure. But given that Mark Evans is down in Adelaide and the uncertainty around where the men are going to be, might come down to staffing a bit and when they can actually get everyone together. So it might be a bit unique in that sense. So no certain dates kind of set in stone. But my biggest concern through the year was probably that there was a lack of a plan B. It almost like you kept trying to butt the head against a wall, trying to do the same thing that wasn't working. So that was my biggest concern, really. I think David Blake, having spoken to him and listened to him a bit, he's a really good communicator and a really good mentor of players. So I wouldn't be too concerned if they went on with him, and I think he can do a job. But I just think that they really need to have a good look at their structures and how they plan on getting success.
Yeah. Well, certainly a story we'll have to follow, and I'm sure you'll break it when it comes to the forefront, and check out the Gold Coast Bulletin to follow that story. The other game for the first double header at Metricon for this season, Gold Coast Suns took on North Melbourne in the AFL Men's. Gold Coast Suns won that pretty comfortably 14-14-98 to North Melbourne's 5 goals 9-39. A 59-point win, the highest winning margin off the round. That stat probably doesn't say too much, considering it's North Melbourne and they're widely predicted to be wooden spooners this year. 3 goals to King, 3 goals to Rankin, 2 goals to Sexton. Best on ground, Noah Anderson with 35 disposals at 80% efficiency, 9 marks, and that was the best game he's ever played in Suns colours. Brandon Ellis was up there as well with 33 disposals, 8 marks, 572 metres gained, and Lockie Weller with 25 disposals, 617 metres gained. But the player ratings for the night tell a different story, as it looks to some of the underrated heroes at the Suns, with Sam Collins a 20.8 player rating, Jack Bowes 18.5, and Greenwood 17.6. They were the 3 highest player ratings on the night, and I think it sort of showed just the team effort that was delivered by the Suns. What the other Suns player I'd like to highlight, which was such a thrill to watch this season, was Oleg Markov. His lively run with and dash off the halfback flank all night resulted in some great pieces of play and a fantastic goal as well, which is actually the play of the game for this week. Markov and his running goal early in the game, I think it was the second quarter, running off halfback and going all the way down to the forward line to just get the ball in for a goal after a umpire score review, just to clarify it didn't touch the post. How did you see that game, Tom, from up in the media box?
I liked it, and just on the Oleg goal, wasn't it a shame to get a review for your first goal for the Suns? Just kind of put a damper on the celebrations as he ran around the field, didn't it?
It sucked the momentum out of it, isn't it? Everyone was just sort of waiting there going, did it touch the post? What's going on there?
Yeah, but he had some fantastic runs, so credit to him. I thought a couple of times he just kind of butchered the ball a little bit, but that's probably marking him a bit harsh. But yeah, some definite run and speed off that back line, which is fantastic to see. But overall, it was an incredible game. You mentioned the guys who kicked multiple goals, but I think they had a lot of different goal kickers as well, which is really pleasing, because if you're not relying on just one player and you've got numerous players hitting the scoreboard, it means everyone's a genuine threat, and a lot of people are open. So forward line and midfielders obviously working in synergy. Noah Anderson, you mentioned, a fantastic game, stepping out of Matty Rao's shadow, and you say it's kind of his best game, but I don't know if you've seen a bad game from him yet. He is fantastic, and he arrived at the club is kind of this incredible ball user and great outside runner, whereas Matty Rowell, his best mate, was inside the engine room winning the ball to get it to him. Whereas over the preseason, you'd see it in the first couple of rounds. Noah's that big now. He's grown that much that he can actually win his own ball inside. So he's one of the most well-rounded young players I think I've seen. He's not only got the outside run ability with pace and endurance, good by hand and foot, really good decision maker, can spot a target and a lead, but he can also win his ball now. So it might be controversial to say, but in a couple of years, do you reckon he might actually go past Matty Rowell? I don't know.
I think he's very capable of it, especially if Rowell's getting set back with injuries. I think Noah Anderson was very much under the radar behind Matty Rowell, and not too much was given to him as far as credit goes through his draft year and in his first year at the Suns. I think the last half of last year, we saw a glimpse of Noah Anderson and what he's really capable of as he was moved more into the midfield, and he had a couple of games where he looked really good. And today, or Saturday, we saw that at its potential of just how good he can be. If he could get to the stage where he's doing this consistently, he'd be a premier midfielder in the competition, maybe even the best. And, it could be the case where Matt Rowell comes back in and they're tagging Noah Anderson and not Matt Rowell.
Geez, that'd be good. Yeah, to have that many good midfielders at your disposal that they don't know who to tag. That's the dream, isn't it?
That is. It's what makes good teams great. So any criticisms from the game? My one, I don't know if it was where I was sitting at ground level, but I felt like there was a lot of fumbles, a lot of missed opportunities, and the delivery inside 50 still needed a lot of work.
Yeah, I know something that they were working on over the off-season was the entries inside 50 metres. They found last year that what the entries that they're going inside 50 for marks at goal, they're actually taking pretty shallow entries, as they say. So they weren't getting it deep right into the box. So they were taking it on really sharp angles and 45 to 50 metres out. So early on, I found they were doing that again. They were struggling to get really close to goal, but then they found a way after probably through the second quarter and into the third, they started being able to get those deep entries and being able to get those goals that were really going to make it easy for the likes of Ben King to kick. My only concern, and it's probably a natural sign that happens with the intensity of the game and how it's being played, is there was a noticeable drop after halftime in intensity from both teams. There was obvious fatigue, and I think a lot of the errors came on the back of that. Plus the dew on the ground obviously makes it a bit slippery. So it's always tough at that time slot up in Queensland to play, but there was a noticeable drop-off I found watching it that in those kind of areas. So if they want to put teams away, which they managed to hold the margin pretty well with North Melbourne and not take the gas off too much, but I think North Melbourne actually butchered a few. So I'd like to see them just kind of keep that intensity a bit more and really blow teams away.
It does seem like a difficult time slot. I think for the last 3 or 4 years, every time I've gone to a Saturday night game, the quality of the football is nowhere near what we should expect, especially for the Suns it is anyway. I think we sometimes came across teams like Collingwood or Hawthorn or Richmond, and their skills, even in those dewy conditions, were far superior than the Gold Coast Suns, which is frustrating as a fan because you would think we should have the dominance when we're playing a home game in those sort of conditions. The Suns should be training in those conditions every single week up here.
Exactly right.
So it's very frustrating, and maybe that's why we only had 6,500-ish fans in attendance. It was less than 7,000 fans that showed up. I was really surprised by that. I was expecting a big game, a big crowd. Were you surprised by that fan in attendance? Do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I thought there'd be more out, particularly given COVID wasn't a massive issue going into the round. I thought there was a really good, the optics around kind of what the health and safety measures were going to be were pretty good. So especially first home game of the year, a real good chance to get a win against a North Melbourne side, a really good chance to see some great players in action for us. So I was surprised. I thought 10,000 or over at least would probably be there, but it just didn't pan out that way. And I'm sure there's a reason for that I'm not aware of. So hopefully COVID can stay away and we can keep building some success. The boys can get back to Repticon, and I'm sure if they start sneaking towards finals, we might get a few there.
Yeah, hopefully we do, because they certainly deserve it if they keep playing good, strong football. And hopefully on the back of wins, we see more fans in attendance at Metricon Stadium. One of the positives I found from the game was the even contribution in the midfield, and obviously down in defence, how impressive they were at working together and getting the ball out of traffic.
Yeah, definitely. They show some incredible skills there, and I think it comes from that added cohesion after having last year playing a lot more together. They had some really good, and I think they only used the same 22 to 30 players a lot of the time. So the Hugh Greenwoods, David Swallows, and Brandon Ellis's, and Noah and Maddie, and everyone in there has played a fair bit together, plus the likes of Darcy McPherson and Ben Ainsworth and that coming into it. So they know each other's games a lot more. They know each other's patterns. Witsy probably knows where to tap it a bit more. So I think that just comes from a bit more cohesion, plus being able to win the ball. So if they're winning most of the stoppages and the centre bounces, then and getting hands on the ball first is obviously the biggest thing you want to do. So to be able to do that, you're on the front foot straight away, which is really impressive.
Yeah, we discussed their composure last week, how impressive it was. Blokes like Jack Bowes and Sean Lemons, Will Powell, having the composure in the defensive 50 to stand up and back themselves in, look for an option. And we saw that this week, but added to that was the speed and agility of having blokes like Noah Anderson, Jack Lukosius and Oleg Markov running through that midfield and delivering the ball inside 50, giving our forwards King and Rankin a chance to really dominate. This style of football is new for the Suns. We've seen them play a lockdown in the past, a very Sydney style of game plan. Bring in the contest, keep the ball close, keep it low scoring. We've noticed a trend. I don't know about you, Tom, but I've noticed I've watched a lot of football this year, and I think it's to do with the new man on the mark rule, and I think it's had a huge impact into the way the game's played. It's a lot more entertaining, it's a lot more fast and free-flowing. Can the Suns maintain a fast, free-flowing football game this year to stay in the contest for finals?
Yeah, I think they can. And when you talk about kind of a new something that we've never seen from the Suns, I think they've shown us that they're capable of doing it. And when you look at the way that they've kind of structured the years under Stewie Dew, it's very much been a layered approach, hasn't it? He hasn't tried to do everything at once, and they could see the way the game's going. So he wanted to sort defence out first, teach players to hit bodies hard and be able to take hits, teach them the basics and the fundamentals of what's going to be their foundation. Defence first, win the footy, and then what they can do from there. So now this is the next phase, and we saw a little bit of it last year where they were able to move the ball better. And on top of that, once they got the contest right, on the back of recruits like Holman and a few others, they've actually, all these high draft picks like Jack Lukosius and Noah Anderson and the other guys, they've kind of brought an elite ball users into the team now. So not only have they got the contest, but they got the balance of the outside runners that can hit targets. So to be able to have that, they're a lot more balanced now. So they can actually, once the new rules come in play, they can actually use the open space a lot better. And North Melbourne on the other hand, they'd had open players and they were butchering the ball and forcing turnovers, whereas the Suns were a lot of times were able to hit a target and move forward quickly off it. And we know they want to move it. They don't have to be direct all the time. They don't have to. They can switch the ball out, but they just want to. They want to move it quickly. Sam Day is better when it's held up, and he can move outside 50 metres. And Ben King loves it when there's pace on the ball because he's so fit. He's like a thoroughbred, I call him. When you look at his calves, he's just got veins popping out. And him and Rankin can move really quickly and have leading patterns. And because they've only got one defender, they get space straight away, and they're giving themselves ample opportunity to score.
Yeah, Ben King's certainly going to be a huge factor in the hopes and dreams of the Suns this season. His partner in crime, Sam Day, unfortunately went down with an injury. We're still unclear on exactly what it is. It sounds like it's going to be a meniscus, but he's getting reports from the surgeon and suggestions on what to do next. But that's a horrible blow for Sam Day. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. And along with that, another knee injury for the Suns. Connor Buderick has done his ACL, so that's his season over, and that's, I think, 3 or 4 ACLs on the Gold Coast Suns list this year.
It's such a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Do you think there's some sort of correlation there with the ACLs on Metricon Stadium? I think we do a lot of them in the last 10 or so years. It seems to be a common injury for the Suns, although at the same time, as I think about it, it's probably more of an increase in ACLs in general throughout the competition.
Yeah, I think I'd need a wider width of kind of games to really get a better understanding of it. But I was saying to Sam this the other day, I just wonder if the shorter preseason, obviously a really long year last year, had a bit of a break and then came into to this year. They only started preseason in January for a lot of them, and then just straight into maybe one preseason game if they're lucky, and then straight into a season. And a season that is quicker, and more intense than last year, and less rotations. So you're having less rest, and you're doing more running, and you're doing it at a higher level. So all those things combined, I just wonder if we're going to get to round 10 or round 15, and we're going to see it across the competition that there's a massive jump in the amount of injuries, in soft tissue injuries that are happening.
I think you might be onto something there, because now that I think about it, 20 odd years ago, an ACL would be common from a player landing awkwardly from a marking contest. These days, ACLs seem to go whenever a player tries to suddenly turn direction and move his body weight around. So it could have something to do with the speed of the game, which would be unfortunate, because it's a great speed of the game, I think, at the moment. And ACLs are such a horrible injury to see a player out for a season. The only other injury that is new for the Suns this week is Jacob Townsend has a facial fracture, which he suffered in the VFL practice game. So he's going to be out for a length of time as well. So we're not going to see too much of him, I don't think, this year.
He might have to wear a helmet. He just come back from a concussion and now he's fractured his face. So maybe he's trying to punch the ball with his face. I'm not too sure, but this poor bloke hasn't had a good run. No,
he hasn't had a good run since he's come up here. The other bit of news that's been coming out is actually quite a big news story, especially for you at the Gold Coast Bulletin this week. The outbreak that's been happening up in Brisbane has caused several things to happen locally, and also to have the Brisbane-Collingwood Easter Thursday clash moved down to Melbourne. Not only that, the Gold Coast Suns side has travelled a couple of days early. They travelled this morning, Tuesday morning, to get out of the Gold Coast and get down to Adelaide. They took 33 players with them, and it seems like they're preparing for the scenario where we don't have a Gold Coast Carlton game at Metricon next week. Can you tell us any more about what's going on there at ground level? I know John Haynes did a press conference this afternoon.
Yeah, so they've obviously taken 33 players down, similar to the Titans, the hotspots on the Gold Coast, getting a little bit worse. They just wanted to make sure, just because all their playing group hadn't been in Greater Brisbane, and while they were still healthy, they wanted to make sure that they stayed that way and weren't going to be kind of restricted in any way. So got them down to Adelaide early. They were going to have a day off anyway today for the players. They were going to fly down Thursday and do some running before the Friday game. So they've just gone down today to make sure that they're in a space where they can play. They're obviously safe. They're isolated away from everything that's happening up here. So they'll do their training runs as normal down there and replicate them before Friday's game. So a lot happening. The big concern is probably what happens next, because they were due to play away this week and we weren't going to see them. But depending on what happens up here, we're going to see them again soon.
Yeah, it'll be a shame. I'm looking forward to getting back and watching that Carlton game as well, because I think the next 2 weeks for the Gold Coast Suns is going to be very telling in whether they can play finals this year. We've got a game against Adelaide this Good Friday, against the team that absolutely demolished Geelong 2 weeks ago. And then they were themselves demolished by Sydney away last week. They're very much a side that we thought would be bottom of the top 18, down in the bottom 4 probably, but they could be better. Either way, the Suns need to show that they can beat those teams that are below them and around them, and I think Adelaide fall into that category, especially away. I don't think we've ever won a game at Adelaide Oval, and it wasn't until last year that we'd beaten Adelaide ever. So, especially with Tex Walker back in form, it's going to be very telling on the Gold Coast Suns season with how they handle the next 2 weeks, and with the added chance that they're going to be away from home for an extended period of time as well. This could be very, very season defining. And then the Carlton game, I think, like I said, we have to beat those teams around us and below us. Carlton's one of those sides that will be challenging for a top 8 spot, we expect. And if the Gold Coast Suns can't beat them, especially on their home deck, if it goes ahead that way, I don't think we can be confident that the Gold Coast would play finals this year. So what are your thoughts on how they go against Adelaide and Carlton in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I think Adelaide, there's some real potential for danger there, because they've built their game around contest. They've gone right back to the basics, high energy, high contest, and that we saw that in their first game in an incredible win. And they're a team along the lines of Sydney Swans. I think both Adelaide and Sydney have really surprised me. I really expected fairly less from them. I thought they were going to be pretty low performers this year, and we would have gone past them pretty easy. But now I'm looking at the Adelaide Crows thinking that's a really tough assignment to go down to Adelaide Oval, vocal away crowd to the likes of Tex Walker, getting balls from Rory Sloane. So it's got to be a real tough midfield battle, and something that could really come down to the wire for the Suns.
It is. It's going to be challenging, especially Taylor Walker leading the Coleman medal, 11 goals so far. It's going to be a big job for Collins and Charlie Ballard to stop Taylor Walker, and I think it all comes from our midfield being able to limit their supply and winning the one-on-one battles that eventuate throughout the game on the night. I think the Suns can win, and I'll agree with what you said on the Heat Room podcast. I think about 2 to 3 goals for the Suns, unlike Sean, who thinks Adelaide will get the win.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because Adelaide Oval, I don't know if you've ever been there, but they get massive crowd there, and it's one of those venues that's similar to Perth and similar to the MCG. You go there and you feel like you're down by 20 points already, and the game hasn't even started yet. So it's a really tough place to go to. A beautiful oval, but I'm hoping that the South Australian boys feel very at home there.
Now, I'm a former Crow Eater, Tom, so I know Adelaide quite well, although I've never been to Adelaide Oval. Last time I was there, it was Football Park that they were playing at, and even then, that was a very hostile ground. Anyone that comes up against the Crows, because down in South Australia, they absolutely love their football, and anyone that doesn't support the Crows or Port are the enemies. Who do you think comes in for the injured Butterick and Day this week? I really like the idea of bringing in Burgess for Day. I think he's got a history being South Australian, being able to play at that oval and understanding it. And I think the form that he showed in the VFL game sort of gives him the opportunity to jump in front of Corbett.
Yeah, definitely. He offers a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if they went for Corbett as well, because I think he provides a lot. His running ability and also his work in the contest and marking is great. But I'm similar to you. I'd go Chris Burgess, because he can also chop out in the ruck, whereas Corbett can't do that. I think Chris Burgess is incredibly versatile. He can play down back, he can play up forward, and he can play in the ruck. Plus, he's got some good height on him. He's got a good kick, and he's mature. So when a team that's still pretty young, he's got experience at AFL level, and he can lead a few of the young boys around. So I'd be very comfortable with Chris coming in.
Yeah, agree with that. And to replace Butterick, I don't think you can really go past Jared Harbrow, can you?
Yeah, who would have thought that we'd be talking about a Jared Harbrow coming in to replace someone? But that's the way it is, and I'm so stoked that we've got someone of his calibre to be able to come in and do that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's time for Harbrow to get back in the side. Injuries paved the way, and to be honest, unless they were to bring in Atkins, but he's only played one game in the VFL practice game, and from my understanding, it wasn't a fantastic game for him, but he did get through unscathed. I think Harbrow still gets that spot. We've been hinting at it, but let's jump into that VFL. We've only got a couple of minutes, so I'll be quick. The Gold Coast Suns played Southport in a practice match, 15 goals 3-93. They defeated Southport 6 goals 11-47. 3 goals for Corbett, 2 goals for Fiorini, Townsend, Huego Paul Oa, or affectionately known as Ace, Burgess, Farah, all scored 2 goals. Atkins played a full game on the wing, but he wasn't mentioned among the best, so I can only assume that he did just enough, but nothing fantastic. And Harbrow and Burgess, like I said earlier, they were amongst the best, and they should probably be first in line to come into the senior side this week. Did you happen to see that game, or did you get any report from one of your colleagues on it?
That one was behind closed doors, so we couldn't actually go watch it, which was a bit unfortunate. But, geez, I'm looking forward to the VFL this year, even for the likes of the Southport Sharks to play some AFL reserves teams. If you're a lover of footy on the coast, then there's going to be a lot more action to be able to go watch at a high level, which is fantastic. But I think you summed it up nicely there, and those players obviously did a terrific job. So yeah, I really can't wait to see the likes of Ace and also Malcolm Roses. I feel like the way the game's being played at the moment, there's a real need for those players again. We've seen the Cyrils and the Eddie Bettses of the world tear up the AFL, but they're really rare commodities, aren't they? Whereas I think the ability to go one-on-one and to dash around and get some space, I think there's going to be a real need for those small forwards and crafty forwards who can kind of get some space, show a bit of speed and get around corners. So I can't wait to see those unleashed. I think they've got to do a little bit more defensive work before they reach it, but hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, agree with those small forwards. I'm really looking forward to see what Mally Roses Jr. can do, because he seems to be one of those players that has so much X factor and can make anything happen. I think he's been running through the midfield lately as well, which would be amazing if he could contribute that at AFL level. Touching on the VFL, we're going to be playing, starting round 1 is April 17 against Footscray at Whitten Oval. Provided that we don't have any more outbreaks and any lockdowns, it should go ahead. There's going to be a 16-game season over 19 rounds, and we play teams such as Footscray, Brisbane, Southport and Aspley twice this year, and then come up against the VFL affiliates and teams off other AFL sides. So it's going to be an increase in the level of competition for the Suns this year. And if that VFL goes ahead, I think it's going to be fantastic. The only problem is probably the name of the league. Not keen on VFL.
No.
All right.
Agree on you that.
Thank you for joining me tonight, Tom. It's been a pleasure having a chat with you, and I hope to have you on the show another time. Or alternatively, you could invite me onto the heat room. I'm more than willing to have a chat with you and Sean.
My pleasure, mate.
We'll see how that goes in the future.
Fantastic.
Until next time, go Suns.